I want to talk briefly about pop culture, specifically a question that's been on my mind regarding pop culture. And the question is this: should pop culture be generational and institutional, or should it not be that? Because when you make entertainment brands generational and institutional, it winds up being the opposite of what pop culture is actually supposed to be, which is a reflection of what the people themselves have decided is popular and fashionable and cool in any given place and time. That question started nagging at me this weekend as I was forcing myself to watch the latest Marvel film, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I don't feel the need to review it per se since it's a Marvel movie from the year 2022, so it's exactly the same as every other Marvel movie post-Avengers Endgame. There's a strong woman of color who's the key to everything, and this time she's got two mommies! So historical, so groundbreaking. The protagonist and the antagonist wind up being the two female characters, while the male title character winds up mostly standing around in the background trying not to look gay while holding two handbags. And I've tried, brother. Take my word for it. Can't be done. There's even a fight scene at the end of the second act where it's a melee involving two men and three women, and the two male characters are dispatched literally within the first 10 seconds so the main part of the fight can be an all-girl three-way. Now, it really is difficult to believe Marvel is making movies this terrible, churning out screenplays that might as well have been written in the faculty lounge at the Gender Studies Department at Wesleyan College, a mere 3 years after they put out the #1 picture of all time, when they had more credibility and goodwill with the public than probably any film studio has ever had in the history of the medium. So we're pretty obviously at the point now with Marvel where the product is being made by people who hate the brand, who hate the characters, and who especially hate the fans of the brand and the characters. And it's the same deal with Star Wars. For 10 years now, it's been run by people who hate Star Wars. Star Trek is run by people who hate Star Trek. So everything that both of those companies vomit out now is just sort of generic sci-fi action show, lots of 21st century woke politics, lots of people talking about their feelings in hallways. And if there's anything I can't get enough of, it's people talking about their feelings in hallways. Star Wars, of course, has been operating under the Disney umbrella since 2012, but Disney has its own story to tell here, as you may have heard, since they've boldly made the transition from beloved family brand providing wholesome entertainment geared for children to lifestyle brand for adult homosexuals where all the corporate executives want to trans your kids. And while we're on Disney, I have to mention one thing here. If I hear one more parent blubbering about, oh, I'm so sad my kids won't be able to love Disney the same way I love Disney, I am going to slap that person like a bitch. Because look, if that's what you're sitting around being emotionally distraught about right now, you need to get a fucking hold of yourself. That slap was for your own damn good. It is a freaking entertainment brand. It does not matter at all. So get the hell over it. Put on your grown-up pants and start being sad about the things for which you have legitimate cause to be sad. There is no shortage of things like that. Joe Biden is the president, after all. But something like that, again, it goes right back to the original question. Should we allow these entertainment brands to become generational and institutional when they just wind up getting co-opted for somebody's dumbass woke politics? When they trade on childhood nostalgia from people my age in order to get away with making complete dog shit products while they gaze longingly at our kids and offer them free candy out of windowless vans? Up until recently, in fairly massive swaths of the state of Florida, Disney was operating as a government unto itself. Well, it still is, actually, because the revocation of those privileges doesn't go into effect until next year. If you treated Disney's little chunk of Florida as its own country with its own GDP, it would have a bigger economy than 1/3 of the countries in Europe. And of all the types of companies to be granted such fantastically preferential privileges by a state government, a children's entertainment brand? Really? The Disney company is 100 years old, give or take a year or two. Marvel has been around for 83 years. Star Trek for 56. Star Wars for 45. Should any popular entertainment brand exist for that long? Does it do the public or the country or the culture any good? Discuss this amongst yourselves while Jim Eagle hits the music. From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where our superheroes are named Swordman, Axeman, and Crossbowman. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. I am your eponymous host and humble servant. And we finally have our newly minted White House press secretary, who is a black lesbian, in case you haven't heard, which you probably have, because that is how she introduced herself at the beginning of her much-delayed first appearance as a member of the starting nine for manager Joe Biden and his Washington wackadoodles. You know, the sports writers don't give the wackadoodles much of a chance to win the pennant this year, but anything can happen, folks. That's why they play the games after all. So here we go. Batting leadoff from New York City by way of Fort-de-France, Martinique. Put your hands together for Baghdad Buckwheat herself, Miss Karine Jean-Pierre! Karine just made her big league debut last week, folks, and she's had a fairly rough go of it so far. In her first game, she committed 3 fielding errors on what looked like routine plays, and things didn't go much better for her at the plate, where she struck out looking 4 times on 12 pitches. They tell us she has all the natural gifts, though, and she really tore it up down in AAA, but it's like they always say, fans, the game moves a bit quicker at this level. And for those of you Washington wackadoodle fans who are meeting Karine for the first time, you'll be interested to know that she's a black lady, and in her spare time, when she's not at the ballpark, taking infield or hitting in the cage, she enjoys having sex with other women. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, those are the only 2 things that are listed in her bio here that the club PR office has provided to us. It says right here, black, bangs other chicks. And you know, folks, I kind of had my suspicions with the second thing, but as God is my witness, I never would have guessed this lady was black. To me, she just looks like any other lesbian immigrant. I don't see color. Okay, I need to stop right there before I ad-lib an entire fake ball game. But seriously, what are you supposed to do with that? When someone introduces themselves by saying, "Hi, this is my skin color, and this is who I enjoy having sex with." Baghdad Buckwheat would probably never think twice about announcing, "Hi, I'm Karine. I'm a black lesbian immigrant." In her circle of associates, in the world she inhabits, each time she introduces herself that way, self-loathing white liberals probably start fawning and telling her how brave and noble and virtuous she is. But out here in the real world where the actual people live, it's really freaking weird and creepy to open by telling people about your sexual proclivities. If I was meeting someone for the first time and they asked me to briefly describe myself, in a million years I would never think to say I'm white and I dig chicks. Because who the hell does that? But this goes to another question that's been on my mind, specifically with regard to the new social strictures under which our leftist social engineer overlords are attempting to make us live, where the previous demand for tolerance and acceptance has now been replaced by the demand for approval and positive affirmation. To all intents and purposes, tolerance is bigotry now. You're no longer allowed to just look the other way and say, all right, whatever. I don't like it, but it's a free country. Let them do their thing. And now you're supposed to wear the rainbow t-shirt and wave the rainbow flag and express unconditional approval about every gay and trans thing you see, whether you actually approve or not. And if you don't jump through every last hoop they tell you to jump through, yep, you are an istophobe. So the question is this. Whatever happened to the right to not give a damn? For I would submit that this right is every bit as precious, every bit as sacred, every bit as crucial to our liberty as any of the other rights that fall under the rubric of the First Amendment. And that question really came into stark relief for me recently when I was watching a documentary about Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. And if you're old enough to remember that era and you were following the NBA at the time, you will recall that the sleazebag sports media spent Larry Bird's entire career trying to drag him into racial controversy after racial controversy. So, yeah, if you thought the sports media going woke was a recent development, it totally wasn't. They've been doing the same bullshit for as long as I can remember. And each time they tried to cook up some racial controversy involving Larry Bird, just because he had the misfortune of being the best white player in a mostly black league, to his everlasting credit, his answer was always the same. He said, I don't care about this stuff. I will never care about this stuff. You guys cannot make me care about this stuff. And he was simply asserting his right as an American and a free man to not give a damn. But they wouldn't let him. They couldn't leave it alone. To the U.S. sports media, a racial controversy is like crack cocaine to Hunter Biden. Crack cocaine on a stripper's boobs. Crack cocaine on a stripper's boobs in between two fat stacks of Chinese cash. And that is exactly the right they are attempting to take away from you and from me right now. Why do you think they shove that rainbow flag in your face every chance they get? Why do you think they fly the damn thing from government buildings? It's their fun little way of telling you, no, you don't get to ignore this stuff and mind your own business. We will continue rubbing your nose in it until you realize how much you love non-normative sexual orientations and you discover your pent-up desire to celebrate them. You don't want to be a homophobic bigot, do you? But then, on the other hand, it also is a bit of a self-defeating enterprise at the same time, because in their pathological desire to force everyone to celebrate other people's sex perversion, they have achieved another effect, one that they didn't want quite so much as the other. They have woken people up to what they are attempting to do to your children in the public schools that you pay for, because what happens when you create a social environment wherein sex perverts can freely discuss their perversions with no fear of recrimination? You wind up with sex pervert teachers posting public videos on the internet talking in great detail about how they're going to trans and gay up all the kids in their class. How they talk about gay and trans stuff all day when the kids are supposed to be learning how to spell and add. More often than not, they shoot these videos inside the classroom itself, where it is easy to see right there in the background that there's so much rainbow shit all over the walls, it looks like Godzilla puked up 1,000 pounds of Skittles. And if you think there is any state or county in the union that doesn't feature teachers in classrooms like that, where purple-haired genderqueer instructors with javelins through their lips hold court in rooms that are festooned from floor to ceiling in homosexual trans propaganda, then you would be mistaken in that belief. Because the capture of the public school system by the radical leftist identitarians on a nationwide basis, with the tips of the spear being the National Federation of Teachers and the National School Board Association, has been accomplished that thoroughly. If a teacher tried to put a Bible verse on the wall, or say, a picture of Jesus, or any other such sort of innocuous talisman of mainstream religiosity, we all know that teacher would be fired in under 24 hours, and it would be a scandal. But the gay, trans, rainbow stuff, the outright sexual indoctrination of small children without parental knowledge or consent, good luck getting that teacher removed from the classroom. Good luck getting any of that Godzilla Skittle vomit pulled off the walls. So in summation, it's a monstrous crime to be a teacher who promotes Christian morality, but it's admirable and praiseworthy to be a teacher who promotes chemically castrating children and sticking their genitals in a blender. That is where we are now. That is what passes for public morality in the minds of the people who run the public schools in this country. And we're seeing kind of a hilarious example of this phenomenon right now with our brand new public health emergency, the great monkeypox pandemic of 2022, in which there are, 70 infections and no deaths worldwide? But pay no attention to any of that. You should be very, very afraid of the monkeypox. Even Dr. Anthony Fauci says you should be very, very afraid of the monkeypox. And there is nobody who has more professional credibility in this area than Dr. Anthony Fauci. If you're old enough to remember the early days of AIDS, then you're old enough to remember the first time Tony Fauci was on national television regularly in the spring and summer of 1986, when he was flatly assuring the country that at least 10% of the adult heterosexual population was going to have AIDS by 1990. And so, some of us, when we saw Fauci pop back up on TV in early 2020, we remembered how badly wrong he had been back in the 80s on the most important public health question of his entire career, and we thought, wait, it's still the same guy? How can he still have that job? Is this a joke? So we saw a bunch of articles the past couple days from the people we used to call journalists and reporters, in which everyone was expressing total bafflement over the monkeypox outbreak. Well, there are no disease vectors. There's no commonalities. We've got people popping positive in countries where this disease isn't even endemic. The public health experts, they are confused as hell. And it takes all the way until today before the fake news sludge merchants finally get around to grudgingly admitting, fine, okay, It looks like the spread is limited to gay men who had anonymous, unprotected sex with random partners at a couple of big European music festivals earlier this month. And then, of course, the World Health Organization immediately issues a statement saying, you're not allowed to call this a gay disease. You are not allowed to talk about the fact that it's being spread exclusively by male-on-male intercourse, and you are especially not allowed to suggest that maybe men should refrain from having anonymous, unprotected sex with each other while there's an outbreak of a potentially deadly STD going on. Because if you said that, you would be a monstrous homophobic bigot, obviously. So yeah, that's what the global public health authorities are focusing on. Not the infectious disease outbreak, but the danger that gay men who have unprotected sex with random strangers might get their fun spoiled or their feelings hurt. In other words, it looks like they're handling this public health crisis just as capably as they handled the last one. And I, for one, I know I sleep a lot better at night, knowing the dedicated professionals at the World Health Organization are watching out for our collective well-being. And now, the Biden administration actually wants to sign a treaty that would surrender this country's national sovereignty on matters of public health and transfer it to the WHO, which at this point is basically an organ of the Chinese Communist Party in all but name. So yes, brilliant idea, Joe. You're not just content with being the worst president ever elected in his own right, allegedly. Now you're trying to surpass the accidental presidents, Millard Fillmore, Andrew Johnson, Chet Arthur, Jerry Ford, to become the undisputed worst president ever. No caveats, no qualifiers. One day when they build the USS Joseph R. Biden aircraft carrier, the ship's motto is going to be, he who finishes last wins the race and the buck stops elsewhere. Wait, that's not right. The ship's motto is going to be, true in a non-shabbat pressure, and you ain't black. Who knows, maybe it'll be the first Navy ship ever to sink while in dry dock. Oh, and we have an update from the amateur porn novelist desk. Apparently Stacey Abrams is running for governor of Georgia again, for some reason. And color me confused, because hasn't she still not conceded the 2018 election? So if you run again against the same guy who beat your ass last time, isn't that sort of an implicit acknowledgement that you didn't win the first time and you actually haven't been the rightful governor of Georgia these past 4 years? Don't fly off the handle now. I know you Democrats get really attached to your delusions. I'm just asking. Me and my heaving, sweaty bosom and my rock-hard nipples as I strip the feedback off your face and gaze into your deep, soulful brown eyes and breathe my last because your fat ass has just crushed me to death because you weigh as much as a small Jeep. And frankly, I'd rather have sex with the Jeep. And we'll leave it there for tonight. Thanks very much for watching. Have a pleasant tomorrow. Try to avoid having random unprotected sex with strangers until next we meet on Wednesday. And try to avoid being crushed to death by morbidly obese gubernatorial candidates. Because those are all words to live by. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.